Now, I know you're in Illinois, right?
Correct.
In Missouri, I heard right next door to you that the regulators are receiving an alarming number of complaints and calls regarding pharmacy work conditions. And I think that's going to be like the theme of this particular episode. The pharmacy work conditions are finally getting some press. Like the media is finally talking about our shitty work conditions. I've been complaining about this for 20 years and it just keeps getting worse. But finally, like the American Pharmacists Association did a survey, 78% of pharmacists said workload exhaustion was an issue. That's up 22% since the pandemic. So obviously COVID and giving the vaccine didn't help, but it was a pain in the ass before that. Like 78 minus 22 is 56. So that was over half. Now it's 78% of pharmacists say workload exhaustion. What have you heard about this current state of things? I assume they're mostly talking retail, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of my videos, people will always say it's also stressful in the hospitals too. Probably not to the same extent as retail, but
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, it's kind of funny. I feel like I've been making these videos for like what 5-7 years about the understaffing, and now it's like everybody's talking about it. At first, I felt like I was alone, but um, I think everybody just burnt out. I think COVID was just the final straw. I guess having to do the testing and the COVID vaccines. People started to speak out, and then like I've always said, like when I first started to do it, I just wanted to encourage other people to speak out. And I think more and more people are just like, F it, I'm speaking out, especially when you've got people who, not everybody's making 65 an hour. Now they're paying people a lot less. So to deal with all that and to make
Yeah,
less
good
money
point.
than people used to get paid, I think people are just fed up.
Well, Business Week also did an article titled Pharmacy Workers Are the Pandemic's Invisible Victims. And they talk about burnout. And I think they interviewed a CVS pharmacist, again, said they were overwhelmed and were worried about making mistakes. And this woman actually closed the pharmacy. And then I guess she was with the company for 8 years and just straight up quit. And the article says that some pharmacies close for days at a time because they're so backed up. That's unbelievable to me because I would imagine you'd get in deep shit with the supervisor because the supervisor doesn't care.
I think now, since there's such a shortage of pharmacists, you could probably get away with that because
The
when I
pendulum
was
has
in retail,
swung the other
yeah,
way.
if you, yeah, I know that I could think of maybe two times. One time it was at my store. One time I was helping out where I just shut the drive-through down just to try to get caught up because they were so behind. And that was like a verbal warning. Shutting down the pharmacy, you were probably going to get a final written warning or probably terminated. But I think now because there's not enough pharmacists to fill shifts, it's like if you shut it down, what are they going to do? They can't replace you.
So we went from indispensable to expendable, and now we're becoming indispensable again. That's good news, I guess. It's only because the working conditions are so horrible, no one can tolerate them anymore. And then I guess in this article, they interviewed a lot of CVS and Walgreens technicians who wanted to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation. It's another sad thing. It's like, we can't say what's going on because we're afraid we're going to get fired.
I was told from a lawyer person I know that there's like laws that protect you from retaliation. Like if you mention something about if you bash your company, your employer, you can get fired. But if you're talking about working conditions, that's actually illegal because
Oh, interesting.
then that would just stop people from reporting terrible working conditions. So I guess it just depends on how you do it. If people go on social media and say fuck CVS or fuck Walgreens, these motherfuckers understaffed, then you probably get in trouble. But if you just kind of just call out the understaffing, you legally can't get fired for that.
Well, they did mention that CVS currently has 4,000 openings nationwide. Walgreens has 15,000. And I guess CVS they made like $3 billion in 2021 for vaccine and testing revenue that they got for that stuff. But The working conditions, again, burnout, people suffering. And I guess the supervisors or the supervisors, whoever the higher ups are, they're full of promises that go in one year and out the other. Like that woman that started the pizza's not working thing.
Glad to know.
Yeah, these CEOs have a very straightforward way of dodging issues, and it doesn't appear to be getting any better. Pauline K. Long, a PharmD, she's a consultant pharmacist for, specializes in diabetes. I guess there was an article about her titled "Part of the Great Resignation," and a lot of pharmacists, like we just mentioned, just after so many years in the company, just straight up walk out and quit. That, which has always been the fantasy, like F this, and you just walk out. But it's actually starting to happen now.
I think the chains want it that way because like the pay is 45 an hour, and I see sometimes they have bonuses, but if they really wanted to correct a shortage, they would pay people at a rate that reflect the demand. They would raise it back up to 55 an hour or 60 or 65, but I think they just want it that way because after COVID's over, they'll probably go back to just, not that COVID will ever be over, but as things start to slow down, probably just try to go back to reducing hours, reducing staff, cutting back like they usually do. Probably in 5-10 years, probably a lot of the chains will probably try to get rid of at least half of their on-site traffic, try to move more stuff to mail order and get rid of the front ends and partner with like these doctors' offices. Like Walgreens did that deal with Village MD. I think they have like 700 stores where it's just, the pharmacy and the doctor's office. And then they cut out a lot of that front end shit up front. So
I also think there's a lot of age discrimination going on because let's face it, the longer you work for the company, the more raises you get. So after 20 years of working for a company, you're making $65 an hour. They want to get rid of all those old pharmacists and bring in the new kids who don't know any better, who are willing to work for $45 an hour, which it's nefarious, it's pernicious, but it makes sense. I understand why they would want to do that, but you can't do that. That's age discrimination. That's against the law, right? But it's clearly what's happening.
I would think age discrimination is against the law, but as often I've seen older pharmacists get fired, I don't know if it is against the law.
There was another article back in December, NBC News. The latest worker shortage may affect your health. Pharmacies don't have enough staff to keep up with prescriptions. So like I said, it's finally getting pressed. They're finally printing these articles. And this article talks about a Rite Aid technician who quit after 16 years in the middle of her shift. Here's a direct quote. It got to the point that it was just such an unsafe working environment where you're being pulled in 1,000 different directions at any given time, and thus you're more likely to make a mistake and not catch it. She got an insulting 25-cent raise, which put her at $15.08 per hour. And I think the median for all technicians in the country right now is $16.87, which is not great. And then I guess a customer yelled at her and she had a panic attack and she was crying and struggling to breathe. And she just left after 16 years, just walked the fuck out. I imagine those stories are much more common than we realize.
I mean, if I'm making $16 an hour, you probably can find something comparable, if not something that pays more with less stress. So I would just walk out too. Like if you're making like 45, 55, 60 an hour, to walk out and try to find something that's comparable, that's hard. So that's probably why more pharmacists just don't walk out. But pharmacists don't want to deal with the stress at the rate that we make. It definitely don't want to deal with it for 16 an hour.
And like, again, like, why are people treating the staff like shit? I don't understand. These people are so cold that they have to part their hair with an axe. I would enjoy working for them a lot more if I were a grave digger. You know what I'm talking about? I would say apply to the post office, folks. I started out at $19 an hour. It's like $19.06 or something. And all I do is drive around and listen to my podcasts and my music. I'm plugged in constantly. I work about an 8-hour shift. and I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to answer any phones. There's no supervisor breathing down my back. You're on your own the whole time. It's beautiful. Do that, everybody. Go to the post office.
I definitely, if I was a technician, I would work at the post office. I know, you know, my grandmother, she retired from the post office, and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, she always used to say, "Baby, you gonna go work at the post office? It's a good job." I said, "No, Grandma, I'm gonna become a pharmacist." I'm starting to think maybe I should have listened, because by now,
Like I said before, it's 1/3 the pay, but 1/10 the stress. That's a
and I
pretty good
probably,
ratio.
and I mean, thinking like thinking about like how much less debt I would have had, you know,
Yeah.
might have been worth it.
It was a great profession like 25, 30 years ago. That was the job you wanted back then. When I first got into it, I'm like, oh, this is a dream job. But it's just when you got 10,000 people becoming baby boomers every year, it's just the volume is just crazy. Plus, the companies are cutting back on your help. It's like a perfect storm. It's like a goddamn George Clooney movie, The Perfect Storm. Like this couldn't be any worse than it is right now. And now we're seeing the effects. People are just fucking walking out.